Well, the action started in the sprint race, and we've had loads of questions coming in throughout what was a thrilling Grand Prix. But let's start with one on the Mercedes battle. Thoughts on Kimi and George's battles? Will they end up taking each other out in a race? Possibly, given the way that they were fighting. They know there's a title on the line. Surely one of them will be champion. The upgrades worked quite well for Mercedes, and they were fighting hard, wheel to wheel. Let's have a look at the most contentious of those moments. It was on Saturday in the sprint. And this is on board with Kimi Antonelli. So, a feature of George Russell all weekend was the lockups at the hairpin. It's going to cost him a little bit more in the Grand Prix. It cost him an opportunity here for Kimi Antonelli in this sprint. So, the final chicane is quite easy to defend, actually, so long as you're not behind on the way in. So, George does the sensible thing here, covers the inside, and really there's no way that Kimi can go around the outside here. So, he has to just tuck in, wait for the opportunity, brushes the grass. There's not a huge amount of space left there by George on the way out. And we come up to the flashpoint then. Turn one, the big moment. George starts harvesting energy. So he's slowing down into the corner. And this seems to incentivize Kimi to have a go. George knows that there's a chance, covers the middle of the road. Pretty sensible driving here. And this is so ambitious from Kimi. So in the old school way of racing, you'd say, no chance, mate. He's coming from a long way back, going to slot it into a gap around the outside, but you're always going to be forced out wide here, bouncing over the grass. And at this moment, you're kind of out of control, bouncing back onto the circuit. So George did a solid job there of realising where he'd forced Kimi and just allowed himself the space to come back through. But these are the sort of moments where you are going wheel to wheel, you are fighting with the grass in play, and you are in a little bit of the luck of the gods as well sometimes for a teammate collision. So on the face of it, you're saying, really ambitious from Kimi, no doubt. Watching a lot of Formula One over the years, it's an ambitious move, and you don't see too many, if any, pulled off for the lead of the race from that far back. But Kimi wasn't happy, and I can see his grievances, actually, because if you bear in mind the racing guidelines for overtaking around the outside, it's not as cut and dry as ambitious move, it was never on. So, we'll bring it back here to the chance now for Kimi. So you get this moment, the active aero shuts for Russell here. So that's where he's coming off the throttle. And there's a lot of work for Kimi to do. But to make a move around the outside, according to the guidelines, you need to be ahead at the apex, you need to be under control, and you need to be not running out of road yourself. You need to be able to keep within the confines of the circuit. So let's have a look as we play this through with Kimi then. Under the current racing guidelines, we get to the apex. Always a little bit of a tricky one when you're dealing with an inch, a centimetre, even less. But he's certainly alongside pretty well here as George gets towards an apex. Kimi's there as well. At the very least, side by side, Kimi, I would say, is under control. And as we play it through here, he is going to stay on the circuit as well. And it is only George coming across. There's actually just a little bit of contact here as well that is going to completely pitch Kimi off there. You can just see a little bit of smoke coming off as rubber hits carbon fibre. Again, maybe a little bit lucky. But you can see then why Kimi was on the radio saying, hang on, this doesn't actually feel particularly fair at this point. Goes off on the grass, comes back, doesn't take the place. But according to the racing guidelines, it was closer than you might have otherwise thought, just thinking back to old school memories and drivers getting their elbows out on the inside, which is exactly what George did. So the stewards didn't look at it. They must have decided then that George was in his right to force Kimi off. But I can understand Kimi's complaints, and certainly a very, very marginal call. We head up towards turn 8 on the same lap, and the race is going to be called off here by Kimi once again being super optimistic down towards turn 8. So the last one was kind of a move that was not looking on, that became maybe on, that was then off from George's defence. But this one is so ambitious. Once again, you've got George harvesting, so he's not in overtake mode. Kimi is, that means he's got a little bit more energy to deploy around the lap. And all of this first sector and up to this point, George is having to recharge at various moments to try and get energy to defend onto the to the straight into the final corner again. So it means Kimi's thinking, hang on, well, if you're going to start harvesting here, I'll go for a move. Looks to the inside, but he's doing so as he goes over a bump, heading for the smallest of gaps here, and it just catches him out into a bit of a snap at that moment, has to correct the steering, and at this point, he's never going to stop the car from that close on the inside. Absolutely blasts it over the grass. Could have had more significant damage as well from that. So sheer youthful exuberance from Kimi. You can see it once again right up to the inside. Look how dusty and dirty it is there as well. Over the bump, manages to catch the slide, and once he goes launching over there, I've seen bigger damage than that. Just one place lost, and that was to Lando Norris, who was very quick in the sprint. But love the fight from Kimi, love the ambition, and ultimately it is a rivalry stoked, and we saw it continue into the Grand Prix.
Russell up against Antonelli, very tight between the two of them. Antonelli outside line, contact off the road. That is so close. Russell stays cool and has the lead, but they're finally brawling at the front between the Mercedes pair.
So let's have a look at the start of the race. Elephant in the room, McLaren are on inters. We'll cover that off in a moment, but it does make a difference to the start of the race for the Mercedes duo as well. So on the second row, Norris has a little bit more tyre temp. He has a great start, and the front three go 3 wide into the first corner. Mercedes have generally got their starts much better in Montreal, so we don't know if Norris and Piastri were on slicks, whether they would have had the same launch, but as it was, it's another race lead for McLaren. But what it does mean is that with this position, George really cannot defend very well from his main rival, which is Kimi on the outside. So you've got Lando sweeping through to a race lead that will probably frustrate him even more, given he's got a pit in the next couple of laps. And you've got Kimi, crucially, making it past George. So let's have a look on board. We can see, first of all, perfect pre-start revs, perfect discipline there from Norris, and on the intermediates, maybe a little bit more grip. Through he goes to the inside, and would have hoped at this point he'd check the mirrors and see everyone in chaos and carnage slithering off the road, but clearly the track wasn't there for the inters. Here we go with George then. This is the more consequential one at the start of the race. Gets off the line, but this is where he uses, I would say, a bit more experience to back out of a move that maybe other drivers wouldn't have done. Because you come in here, we've seen so many times the old sandwich effect, especially at the start of the race, especially on the first lap, where Kimi wouldn't necessarily know where Lando is, Lando wouldn't necessarily know where Kimi is. George is the only driver here with a view of both. If Lando wasn't there, he's going to absolutely barrel speed in here like he did on the sprint. He's going to shuffle Kimi wide, and he's going to keep hold of the lead, probably, from this position. But he knows he can't do that because of the McLaren. So the fact that Norris is there means that George has to just be super cautious, and that is what allows Kimi through into the race lead. So finally, it's a good start from Antonelli, and instead of losing places on the first lap, he's effectively making them. And it could have been an important pass. As it was, a bananas race for the two Mercedes. We've got loads more switching good positions to get into, and actually, the start didn't make such a big difference.
And the Canadian Grand Prix is underway. Lando Norris with the chance, gets the launch. Lando Norris to the lead of the Grand Prix. Can he slow it down? The Mercedes did not get the launch off the line on the Red Bull slick tyres. Piastri has not been able to do what his teammate could. An amazing start for Lando Norris.
So, lap 6, the first time that we get another moment here. It's Antonelli being passed by Russell. It's a straight line pass for George, manages to come back through. He's been hunting down and finally gets the opportunity. But this is probably the next closest moment they had in the race. So you've got Russell coming through. Now, Antonelli here has a chance to either try and defend at the inside, but he's really just too far back with the straight line speed advantage that George has. So he does the kind of sensible thing in many ways and slots back in to take the racing line and sweep into this corner. The problem is, we've seen it so many times before, as soon as you tuck in, even in this generation of car, you're still having loads of dirty air. So it's not as bad as it has been, but from this position, you're never going to get airflow over the second car there because George is taking the best of it, and it's then just dirty for Kimi, and there's just less of the air for him. So he's got less downforce, which means he has a big lockup, and he is so close here to drilling the back of his teammate. And that would have been 100% on Kimi for choosing that line and braking where he did there. So gets away with that one. It's George into the lead of the race. But it wasn't the only lockup we had in the race between the two Mercedes. George's nemesis corner comes back again. Turn 10 was really tricky. As the rubber was going down, you're losing rubber from the tyre. You're then losing a little bit of temperature from the tyre. There's graining on the front axle. And both drivers were struggling. In fact, all the drivers really were struggling with turn 10 with a bit of a tailwind there as well. George manages to come back through. Then he's got more energy to deploy on the straight, so gets away with quite a big mistake. And then knows that he's going to have this pressure moment up towards turn 1. They obviously fought it out the day before. Kimi knows this time you're not going to do it from here. That's way too brave. So has a little dangle, but doesn't commit too hard and is really trying to pressure George at this point, but you're not going to come through in the next few corners either. Takes a few more laps, though, of constant pressure. When you're within a second, you get that overtake, you get a little bit more energy to use, and you can keep the pressure on. We get another lock-up for Russell. Same phenomenon, right front, struggling to get it stopped. And this time, Kimi's going to sweep past right on the outside again. But, once again, doesn't have the final bit of killer speed to make the move on George. So he manages to just deploy enough here, Russell, to stay halfway up the inside. Now, there's really tricky for Antonelli to know what to do. Look, you see, maximising that track width, once again there, over the edge of the grass. He's done that a few times in the race and in the sprint as well. But from here, couldn't make it back past, and Russell gets away with another bit of a lock-up. Third time lucky for Antonelli, or third time unlucky for Russell. They're trying to put a lap on Valtteri Bottas. This time again, Russell goes wide, and this time he doesn't have the energy of which to defend. So Antonelli's going to get in the wheel tracks, and he's just going to have a little bit more deployment. Bottas will get a great view of the two coming past, and Russell wafts the middle of the road. But that is the move done. And you think, OK, well, Kimi's been the faster. He's putting all this pressure on. Now he's got the race lead. It's finally the pressure's told. He'll go off and he'll probably win this one. Wrong. The pressure then turns to the other shoe. And their drivers are fighting so hard to try and get this 1 second gap. So that's why you've got George initially 1.1 seconds, 1 second, fighting for half a tenth each lap. And they were trading blows for about half a dozen laps before George made his initial front lock-up to get Kimi back into that 1 second. Here, you've got Kimi at about 1 second on George, maybe fractionally over, but he's desperate to keep it because once you break the 1 second, then George is back into the same as Kimi in terms of the recharge allowance, so you don't get the benefit of overtake mode, which was worth a few tenths in Canada, and you can use it around the lap as well. So you can just use it to stay close, keep the pressure on, and make drivers ahead brake late, brake hard, and force mistakes. So Antonelli's pushing super hard, too hard. It's the biggest lock-up of all as he goes off wide at turn 10. Russell comes back through. They continue to fight. But again, it just shows the pressure that these two are putting on each other. They go wheel to wheel once again down towards the final chicane. And here, once again, you've had a dress rehearsal of these two positions. Antonelli this time even slightly further ahead of Russell on the outside. George trying to defend it, but it's really a difficult corner to go around the outside if the driver on the inside wants to make your life hard. All the incentive in the world for George to make life hard here for Kimi. They come in and it's punchy play from both of them. They're super committed. Antonelli's going to go through the runoff. Interestingly, so is Russell here. He's going to cut across as well. Neither driver could make the corner. Again, a little bit of a question mark on that, but when you actually see it on board with Kimi, you can see the speed that he's carrying and is absolutely monumental. I don't think he's ever going to make the corner. Goes super ambitious around the outside, and then he's nowhere near it as he comes through. So, nor was George, and certainly George probably could have done with keeping it on the track to make absolutely sure. He wasn't particularly happy with where Kimi gave the place back the next lap. But you can see there, Russell also in so deep, trying to make sure that, that Kimi couldn't have an easy pass around the outside. As it was, the fight continued until it didn't. Final moment then for George Russell. Comes in towards turn 8 and the battery dies on him. And after 30 laps of an amazing scrap between the two Mercedes, I don't know how long they could have kept that intensity up for. Could they have done the whole race? Seems like a huge amount of work to do, just in terms of mental load, to be that on it, that close, wheel to wheel, with your title rival, without having some of these marginal things go wrong and having an incident, but they were doing a great job of it. Finally, Russell out, fuming, throws the headrest, and gets a £5,000 suspended fine, which for me is nonsense. It's emotion in sport. It's the biggest moment of his career. He's been really hard done by. Whether or not he launches that headrest a few metres away from the car or it stays on the car, it's not a big deal. And I like to see emotion, whether it's a driver kicking a tyre, whether it's a driver sometimes hitting a steering wheel or a halo. It happens. These are huge moments. The stress level's high. His heart rate is through the roof. It's the biggest moment of his career. It's normal and it's human. And I don't know if he needed to go and see the stewards from that one personally.
Feels like somebody doesn't want me to fight or compete for this championship. Just every 3 out of the last 5 races, there's just been something really going against us. Just a bit lost for words right now.
Not really the way I wanted to win, if I have to be honest, because it was a tough fight with George, and it was very intense, fun. But I think it would have been cool to see how it would have ended up. You know, it was a tough battle, it was intense, and of course I felt sorry for him. But of course we'll take the win, and now we move forward.